Park Lane, we were great friends with the Dakin children who lived next door, Tony, Bobby, and baby Janet, and whose garden was linked to ours with a 5-bar gate. My mother would often send me through the gate with messages for Mrs. Dakin. On one occasion, it was Mr. Dakin who greeted me and told me that Ivy's in the bath. That seems so funny to me, because I never knew Mrs. Dakin as Ivy. The boys would often beat me up. One time I remember Bobby Dakin pushing me into our ornamental fish pond. I emerged spluttering amongst the dark green water lily leaves. But having grown up with brothers, I was a bit of a tomboy and would sometimes give as good as I got. I once challenged my younger brother to a boxing match, convinced I would win, although William managed to get in the first punch and landed the biggest whack on my nose. I just stood there, too stunned to cry, as the blood gushed from my nose. I remember my horrified fascination at seeing it splatter onto my jumper, shockingly bright against the pale blue wool. The tears came soon enough, though. I made an awful fuss about it, because the only way to get any attention from the grown-ups was to make a huge scene. And so it was William who got the ticking off, even though I was the one who had started it. At the back of the house, Dad had built an aviary to keep budgerigars, one of his many hobbies, and there were always chickens for eggs. Dad used to cook up potato peelings and kitchen waste to mix with bran to make chicken feed, in an industrial-sized pressure cooker he kept in the garage, a huge contraption that looked like a giant saucepan. One day, without warning, the cooker suddenly exploded while my big brother Roger was nearby. He was rushed to Forbes Fraser Hospital, and I remember going to visit him and being immensely shocked, because my brother seemed to have turned purple. At some point, someone must have explained to me that he'd been covered with ultraviolet blue, a bluish-purple lotion that was used to treat burns at the time. Another awful drama occurred when Dad set up an incubator to hatch a clutch of the eggs. Every day we went to look at them to check how they were doing, but the heat from the lamp must have been too fierce, and to my horror, some of those dear little chicks got burnt and died. Gosh, it was traumatic. You really remember the childhood dramas, don't you? If we weren't running around in the garden, we would be across the road in Victoria Park, playing on the swings, or on an afternoon walk with Mum. And when anyone came to visit, whatever the weather, we would go on picnics. That was a real treat. Mum would pack egg and cress sandwiches, sausages and biscuits, perhaps a bit of cake if you were lucky, and there would be games and friends and running about. We would usually picnic with a purpose. On the early days of spring, we would go primrosing, gathering up posies of the pale yellow flowers, while in summer the picnic activity would be swimming. We would often drive to a village called Freshford, where there was a weir, and I remember slipping down its mossy side into the green depths, my knitted woolen swimming costume soaking up water like a sponge and dragging me down. In autumn, we would hunt for wild mushrooms and scour the hedgerows for blackberries, taking home whatever fruit escaped our mouths to be made into jam. Another favourite destination for family picnics was the village of Laycock, famous for its grand house, Laycock Abbey, where we would set out our feast by the most beautiful stretch of the River Avon. Dad was a keen photographer, and every time we went there, he would tell us about a former resident, the Victorian photography pioneer Fox Talbot. "The first ever photograph was taken of this very window," he would say, pointing at the house, and we would all line up on the bridge and look obediently over towards the famous window, even though we'd done it dozens of times before. I suppose one of the reasons we spent so much time outside when we were young was because there wasn't a great deal of incentive to stay indoors. I had toys, of course, my rocking horse and a little black Sambo doll were particular favourites, but I was never the sort of child who would sit prettily and read a book or do a spot of needlework. When we got back from school, we would always cluster around the radio at 5 o'clock to listen to classic stories like Robinson Crusoe and Swallows and Amazons on Children's Hour. But in those days, like most people, we didn't have a television. I still remember the excitement when, in my mid-teens, our friends, the Wills family, acquired a television set.